Hello, everybody. Welcome back to everybody's favorite wrestling podcast, Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense, where me and my friend John, we talk about professional wrestling and about how little sense it makes. And luckily for us, we are smack dab. Well, not luckily for us, I guess. What I was about to say was luckily for us, we're smack dab in the middle of a pandemic. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like we're very lucky. But however, that has, in consequence, led to some very nonsensical wrestling for our viewing entertainment, which means we can talk about something crazy and goofy. Hooray!
Yay.
Lucky us. Let me just ask you this, John, right off the bat. Would you rather have something crazy and goofy happen every week so that we can talk about it? Or would you rather just have some good wrestling that we don't have to complain about?
I mean, it would be nice to just talk about some good wrestling every once in a while.
Well, I have some bad news for you. We are just days away from a 2-day Wrestlemania spectacular extravaganza.
Too big for one night.
What number is this? 36? 35?
Is it 36 maybe?
36?
I can't remember.
I have no idea. There's been too many of them. And so this year, yeah, they decided to split it into two, which was interesting enough. That's newsworthy, which I think was a good idea. Very, very good idea, because I remember last year and a couple of other years, you and me were sat up until 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Which is tough going to watch 5 or 6 hours of wrestling in a row, like just straight in the morning. It's not easy.
I think it would have been really tough as well with the whole empty arena, lack of atmosphere going on in this year's WrestleMania.
Yeah, like I don't think you could have done it.
No.
You really couldn't have done it. So yeah, given that this whole crazy pandemic is going on and nobody's allowed into the arenas and stuff, that has led wrestling, WWE in particular, to make a couple of changes in order to be able to put their programming out. And that means that we got WrestleMania being split up into 2 days. It means that they were taped not in a big stadium, but for the most part, were taped in the Performance Center. So there's no audience, which is a strange kind of atmosphere to it. And it also means that some of the, I guess all of the matches were pre-taped. It wasn't live, but some of them were pre-taped and heavily edited.
Yes.
Shall we say. So all of that leads us to lots and lots of stuff to talk about, which is good. So right off the bat, I want to ask you a little question, John. What did you like about this year's WrestleMania?
I'd say the thing that I liked the absolute most was the NXT Women's Title match, which I believe it kicked off the night 2.
Yeah.
Between Charlotte and Rhea Ripley. That was just like a good old-fashioned, hard-hitting, brutal match with like good quality wrestling. And it went like, I think, some 20-odd minutes or something, but it didn't feel like it went that long, which is a problem, I think, like a few of the other matches over the 2 nights kind of had, where they were long matches, but they felt really long as well. Whereas this was just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. 2 really talented wrestlers just kicking each other's ass and putting on a hell of a show. And I think, I know a lot of people have sort of kind of questioned the result as well, with Charlotte winning the NXT Women's title. Where you kind of say she doesn't need the belt, and it almost looks like it's designed to derail Rhea's career, or in a way, but like I don't think it's gonna like harm her much in the long term, to be honest. I think it's the kind of thing where, okay, it's special for WrestleMania. Charlotte clearly is, one of the best on the roster, men or women. So her winning a title isn't a big deal as far as I'm concerned. And Rhea coming back to eventually win the title back, which I think is the direction they'll probably end up going, is, it'll just make her a bigger deal when that does happen.
I didn't think that it was some kind of like demotion to Rhea Ripley at all, though, because it's Charlotte Flair.
Mm.
Having her lose to Charlotte Flair is it's not a surprise, especially in a competitive match that went on for like 20 minutes or whatever. Like, it's not like she was just squashed in a 2-minute match for a championship that I'm sure will come up later on in this podcast. But like, I mean, I don't know. I was a little disappointed in the result of that match, to be honest with you. Like, I wasn't surprised. I'm like, of course, Charlotte Flair has such a good pedigree, and she's very, very good. She really is. And she's won championships plenty, 10-time champion apparently.
Yeah.
In her very short tenure, so she's got the chops to be able to do that kind of thing. And to pull out a win, especially at WrestleMania, like that wasn't necessarily a surprise. But I really, given that they had done such a good job of building up Rhea Ripley as a proper contender to Shayna Baszler, who was invincible and unstoppable, and then Rhea Ripley comes out and is finally Shayna Baszler's equal. She's able to, beat her, the only person in a long time who has been able to come along and have that kind of shine to them. For her to take that momentum, and she's been defending the belt as well recently. She's been on a tear. She's been doing a really good job as women's champion. For her to come into WrestleMania and to lose the belt to Charlotte Flair, who hasn't been on NXT in 5 years,
something like that,
is a shame. And it also makes NXT look very kind of strange when you think about how Shayna Baszler looked amazing, and then Rhea Ripley looked amazing, and then you look at both of those women and how their matches at WrestleMania turned out. It's very surprising. Well, again, not surprising, maybe not the right word, but
well, I don't know. I'd say like the result in the Becky Shayna match especially was a surprise to me, because that's the one where I thought, it seemed like the story going in was Becky's overconfidence was going to kind of finally come back to haunt her. Like she basically rode a wave of momentum to the top by being like the ultimate underdog, the one who was kind of, like sort of looked down on, who people kind of underestimated and stuff, when she was confident in her own abilities. And then she kind of, she rode the whole momentum of being the man and won the title and has been champion for a year. But it seemed like, especially with like the whole thing where she came out with like those wacky sunglasses and like a jacket or something, and it seemed like, she was too confident in her abilities, whereas Shayna Baszler is someone who, like you say, has obviously been on a tear in NXT for a long, long time. Looked pretty much unbeatable in all that time as well. And it just felt like the perfect opportunity there for Shayna to take advantage of Becky's overconfidence and walk out with the title, and then give Becky something to do to kind of get her mojo back and kind of go for the title again.
Right. It was very unexpected. I thought that was a lock. I really did. I thought I would buy, if I had any money to put on it, I would have put money on Shayna Baszler winning, because Becky needed that kind of. We talked about this in the last one. Was it the last one? I think so. About how Becky needed something to her character to get people to stay invested in it. Not that she's not good, and not that she's not a great worker and has a good character, but the ultimate underdog doesn't really work when you're on top all the time.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan wasn't an underdog. He was Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? Like, he was on top and he was the man.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Becky Lynch has long since kind of lost that underdog mentality because she's the man. And if she doesn't have viable contenders, like that was part of the problem with Hulk Hogan back in the day, is that they just had to sack people to put up against Hogan. You know what I mean? They were just feeding Hogan with person after person after person. And there's, a predictability there that is not fun if you just have somebody win all the dang time, And it's the same kind of thing that people would say about John Cena a couple of years ago. Is that he was on top, and that's fine, but he always, for some reason, I guess this is quite a parallel to Becky Lynch, he always, for some reason, had this kind of like underdog-ish, like I'm the one working my way up here, and you're like, yeah, but you're the champion, and you have been for months. Like, it was always very strange when John Cena would pull that kind of thing because that wasn't really his character.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, recently for the build up to WrestleMania, I felt like they were not really going to focus too much on Becky Lynch like that. They were going to focus more on Becky Lynch being overconfident and not taking Shayna Baszler seriously. When in reality, they did the opposite. They had Shayna Baszler not take Becky Lynch seriously, and then Becky Lynch kind of pull one out of the bag.
Yeah.
Like that was a strange one. I don't know. I mean, again, I enjoyed both the women's matches.
Yeah.
With Charlotte Flair and with Becky Lynch. I thought they were fine. I thought the Charlotte Flair Rhea Ripley one was really shouty.
I love that though, because it kind of made up for the empty arena atmosphere.
One thing I really enjoyed about the empty arenas was that you could hear like the really good shit talking. And I felt with that match, the Rhea Ripley Charlotte Flair one, it was a little too shouty and a little less like bravado-esque. It was just a lot of screaming. And like you said, it went on for like 20 minutes, so it was a strange one.
Yeah, it sounds a bit dodgy. Like if you're
really
living at home and your parents are in the room next door or something trying to sleep, and they can just hear two women like shrieking at each other.
It was yes, a very strange thing to be able to explain to people. What else did you like about WrestleMania?
I quite like the Sami Zayn Daniel Bryan match. Even though it wasn't like the kind of sort of technical wrestling match that we know those guys are capable of, I just really liked the story of it and like the roles that they both played in it, with like Sami Zayn, who to me it's insane like how good of a like obnoxious heel he is, considering he spent so long in his career as like the quintessential babyface. But he's just become this like cowardly heel who which you don't really see much of these days in like WWE or anything. It's usually like cocky, arrogant heels or whatever, people trying to be cool, whereas Sami Zayn is definitely not going in that direction. He's kind of hiding behind Cesaro and Nakamura and stuff, and so it just created like a good little story where he's stalling for ages to try and avoid Bryan, and then he tries to get like help from his buddies, and then when Daniel Bryan does finally get his hands on him, he pretty much just really badly kicks Sami Zayn's ass as well, like he just really laying it in there. And Zayn was pretty much not really getting in any offense, so it results in him kind of winning via shenanigans, like pretty much weaseling his way to the retaining the title. But again, it plays into the bigger story, and I thought that was just really well done.
I agree with that on pretty much all points. I really do miss the Weasley heel angle. That's just a thing that for some reason kind of disappeared from wrestling for a long time, which is a damn shame, because that's part of, like, to me, that's part of like being a quintessential heel. Everybody thinks that you want to be a cool heel or a big fucking monster or whatever, but I'm like, really, you can get a really good storyline out of, a Weasley heel with a big muscly bodyguard or something like that.
Yeah.
And Sami Zayn fits the bill because he's one of the smaller guys on the roster, and he's flanked by Cesaro, who's one of the strongest men on the roster, and Shinsuke Nakamura, who's no slouch either. So like that angle totally works, and they told a really good story. Then the story in that match was exactly what you just said, is to highlight that, to really highlight how much of a weasel Sami Zayn has been and how kind of plucky Daniel Bryan is for constantly trying to get, he's trying to fight him, he's trying to get a good match, he's trying to go in there and win the championship. And Sami Zayn is more content with running away with the championship than having to fight Daniel Bryan. And they told that story pretty perfectly. It was no 5-star classic by any means.
No.
Which is a shame, because I feel like those two guys probably could give us a 5-star classic. But at the same time, it was a well-told story that got both guys over for what they're trying to get over, if you know what I mean. So I was all for that. I tell you what I really liked was, and this might have been my match of like the 2 nights, was Kevin Owens versus Seth Rollins.
Oh yeah.
I loved that match because like you've already got 2 guys who are incredibly good, and Seth Rollins for a while, to me, like some point last year, was being a little bland, or a little like not, you wouldn't be like, hey, did you see that Seth Rollins match? There was just something about it, and I can't explain what it was, but I feel like now, as he's much better as a heel.
Yeah, definitely.
Much, much better. Kevin Owens, I would have said, again, perennial heel, but he's doing pretty well as a face. So I can't argue with that. And again, this match kind of got that across very, very well, in that Seth Rollins was out there and got himself disqualified, but Kevin Owens didn't want to stop the match like that. He wanted to keep it going and get a legit win. Plucky underdog face kind of deal. So I enjoyed the way that they worked that match. I also enjoyed him jumping off the WrestleMania sign.
Yeah,
because
that looked brutal as well.
If you're gonna point at the sign, at least have it do something.
Yeah.
I love the slow motion of the jump. Oh, beautiful, very, very good. So that was one of my favorite matches of the night. I like the ladder match.
Yeah.
I think everybody liked the ladder match.
Absolutely. But that was like a weird one, because without, the roar of the crowd, that was the one I was most worried about, because you think like you need that kind of extra adrenaline to kind of keep getting up when you're bouncing off ladders and taking all these big falls and stuff in a match like that. But fair play to like the 3 guys in it. They did a hell of a job.
My favorite part of it was that The Miz wasn't in it.
Yeah.
But like overall, it was a very, very good match there. To me, I think the match that really needed the crowd the most was the Edge Orton match.
Yeah.
Like that match, because Edge was coming back for a straight up one-on-one match, and because of what Orton had done to him and stuff like that, you really needed to feel the crowd hate Orton and feel the crowd appreciate Edge, and that would have I think that would have made that match a better, because that was a long match.
Yeah, it was apparently almost 37 minutes. I'm pretty sure I read it was like the second longest match in WrestleMania history.
And we all know what the first longest match was, right?
Yeah, that would be the Iron Man match.
The Iron Man match, which was obligated to go for at least an hour.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was very long. And it wasn't that it wasn't fun, because it was fun. I did enjoy watching it. But it dragged on, like, way too. If you cut, I'd said if you cut like 5 to 10 minutes off that match and added it to the Raw Tag Team Championship match that came on like right after it or right before it or whatever, that would have made both matches much better.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. This was a match I really, really wanted to like. Having Edge come back and everything. Like, I don't know if you watched the WWE 24 special on him and his like comeback and everything, but that was amazing. Like a really good documentary, and it just felt like this match was such a letdown after being that hyped up for it. Like I don't know. I think last man standing matches don't really come across that great at the best of times due to the the counting spots slowing the match down and then creating all these like artificial lulls where someone isn't going to get counted out in the first 5, 10, 15 minutes or whatever.
Right.
But then like you add in the whole like a lot of it is just like kick punch stuff as well. There's not much going on, and I mean I do appreciate some of the like random creative spots that they tried throwing in, like the whole um like in the boardroom or whatever it was where Edge like hangs upside down on some
On the mesh on the ceiling.
yeah, and then
By
just
the
drops
way,
down.
what meeting room or boardroom has mesh on the ceiling? What the fuck?
Yeah, it's pretty random. I didn't, but then there's the whole choking spot as well with like the weight cable, which well, I just why did they include that? I mean,
like days after, or like a
yeah,
week or two after that Dark
Dark
Side
Side
of
of
the
the
Ring.
Ring.
Oh my god.
I just don't understand the mindset there. Like, surely someone should have made the connection and been like, maybe we'll edit that bit out. But
Right, like that's the thing I don't get. Like I don't begrudge Edge and Orton for doing that, but this whole show was taped like a week before they
mm,
showed it, before it went on air on Saturday and Sunday. So there was plenty of time to A, make that match shorter, and B, cut that bit out.
yep,
And both of which would have, worked together hand in hand and would have made that match better. To be honest, I didn't really, I like that, I wasn't that bummed out about that part of the match. And without getting too far down that rabbit hole, I feel like for example, you find it like kind of uncomfortable to watch Benoit
mm,
matches now, right?
yeah, oh, yeah, big time.
But like I don't. I could still happily watch Ben because I know he was a good wrestler. You can't take
Mm,
that away. It was awful what he did, but he still put on good matches. So I find that is a common theme, maybe subconsciously or whatever. But the people who notice that spot in the Orton Edge match with the weight, the weight belts and stuff, are the people who can't watch a Benoit match anymore.
yeah.
I find that interesting, and again, like that is not based on a whole lot of research. I haven't polled the entire world about that, but like it seemed like a common theme to me. Um, but yeah, let's not go down that. We'll save that for the next podcast, maybe. Um, but I, I feel like because they knew that this was going to be an empty arena match or an empty like arena show, that's why they did a lot of that stuff.
Mm,
If it had been in a stadium, I guarantee you 99% of it would have been in the ring.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know. So I feel like once they knew that they were kind of free to do whatever they wanted, they were like, well, let's just go crazy and see what happens. Which is the kind of vibe that I liked going into WrestleMania. I thought that's the kind of vibe where there was this unpredictability about it, where you felt like people were going to have fun with their matches and try to experiment more and do things, such as Kevin Owens jumping off the sign, and the whole Orton Edge match.
Mm.
That there was going to be a lot more like playing around and fun stuff like that. And I'm not sure if we totally got that.
No, I think it suffered like similar issues to like the last few Triple H matches at WrestleMania, where he's just kind of he's tried too hard to make it like an epic kind of match and
Mm.
gone and overboard almost, and that's ended up taking away from it more than anything else. But I
Well,
mean, I will say the one thing I really did like about the match was the ending, and not just because it was the end of the match after like nearly 40 minutes, but like the way Edge was kind of like showing the emotion on his face and stuff about like the depths that Orton were making him go to kind of put him away with the concerto. Like that was definitely the best part about it, I thought. But again, it was just it took a long time to get to that point,
we have a really long time.
and I'd pretty
Edge,
much lost interest by that point as
E-
well.
Edge was always really good at that kind of stuff, like the facials and the emotions and stuff like that. Like he
Mm,
could get that across very well. He was very good at that. Without crossing that kind of hokey line.
yeah.
He was always pretty good at doing that. I was really hoping that instead of like the one man concerto, we had, and I know it's wishful thinking because only like 7 people were allowed at the arena at one time. But oh, wouldn't it have been wonderful if Christian came back to help Edge hit Randy Orton with that concerto?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been a wonderful thing for the both of them to be wheeling on Orton? Like I know that the storyline was Edge versus Orton, obviously, but having Christian pop in is one kind of good fan service for everybody who gets the angle, but two also shows a very important flaw in the build up to Edge versus Randy Orton, in that a lot of Edge versus Randy Orton, the build up seemed to be that Orton loved Edge so much that he was going to beat the shit out of him.
Mm.
And if you had Christian there, you could go, well, here's a guy who loves Edge and isn't beating the shit out of him. You know what I mean? Like you could. That was a very strange way to build up a match between two people. Like
It kind of reminded me of like back in the day when it was Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels building towards a match from the Royal Rumble to WrestleMania, where they're not like, interacting week after week. Shawn Michaels after the Royal Rumble, I'm pretty sure he wasn't really seen much for like a good month or so. And yeah, so it was like similar to that with like the beating that Edge took, and then finally showing up and having like another confrontation with Randy. But I get what you mean. Like I guess they kind of used Beth in that role rather than Christian, of having, like her trying to like, be the one who loves Edge as well, obviously. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, everybody loves Edge.
Yeah.
We all love Edge. We were all very excited to see him come back. So yeah, I'm not gonna begrudge him too much for this. However, I also don't want that to be an excuse for a lot of these matches.
Yeah.
I don't want to constantly be like, well, I'm not gonna begrudge him too much. I'm like, well, I think some begrudging is necessary for 6 hours, over 6 hours
Yes.
of shenanigans. One thing I wanted to talk about that we touched upon briefly earlier was just how gosh dang short both World Heavyweight Championship matches were.
Well, not just how short they were as well, but like how they were pretty much the exact same layout too.
Right. They were. I mean, you could take away the word short and substitute in the word shite, and you would have pretty much the same thing. I mean, we're all psyched that Drew McIntyre won the championship,
Mm-hmm.
but for him to win it like that felt a bit lame.
Well, I
I,
think
I,
lame in terms of the lack of crowd, because I think he deserved a crowd to be there and like cheer him on and stuff for that moment where he finally became the chosen one after all these years. But I mean, in terms of like the kind of matches you're going to get out of Goldberg and Brock Lesnar these days, that's it. It's just going to be like a finisher fest where they just keep exchanging finishers or hitting one after the other until someone doesn't
That
get up anymore.
sucks. Like, that's not good psychology. That's not anything.
Yeah.
And we've seen Brock Lesnar very recently have a really good match with Daniel Bryan. What was that, like a year and a half ago?
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good match, right? Are you really telling me that Brock Lesnar versus Drew McIntyre couldn't have gone 10 minutes?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The Goldberg one, I mean, I get that 100%. That was probably the best we're gonna get out of that guy. But
Mm-hmm.
Brock Lesnar and Drew McIntyre could have been like somewhat decent. That's what I
Mm.
think. It could have been, and it wasn't. And it was just like, here's some finishers, and here it is again, and that's the end of it. I'm like, well, why did you bother turning up? Like, that's what
Yeah.
grinds me about a lot of this stuff. Like, Brock Lesnar's on a per appearance deal. He's not on a per minute deal. You know, he's there. If he's at the arena, then he's at the arena,
Mm.
and he's capable of doing a 10-minute match. And a 10-minute match isn't even like a whole lot, right? We just saw Randy Orton and Edge beat the shit out of each other for almost 40 minutes,
Yep.
right? Which is 10 times longer than what Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar did. And you know, I don't think it's much of an exaggeration to say I wish that match would have went 5 minutes. You know, but it didn't even. I was disappointed about that one because I thought that both guys, like Drew, really deserved to win the belt better than that. And not just because there was nobody there, but I mean, like, to go down that route of just like, oh, he hit the F5, oh, he did it again, what are you gonna do this time? Oh, you know, like, it's so old and it's so trite, and it's hopefully the reason they did that twice on this weekend is because that is 100% the end of that. You know, like, there's gonna be no more of this bullshit,
Mm.
and I don't think it will be. That's the issue. The
It
Goldberg
was.
one, what?
I was just gonna say, and technically it wasn't the main event as well. The apparently there was a match with Big Show which happened afterwards, which wasn't on the WrestleMania broadcast, but which was on Raw. And yeah, so yeah, after Drew won, he kind of had Big Show come out and basically you know, talk shit until Drew agreed to a match with him. And that match did go like almost 10 minutes, and they actually tried wrestling in it. So
Right, and that's the Big Show.
yeah.
The Big Show at this point in his career is outworking Brock Lesnar. Like, isn't that bizarre? Oh, I don't know, man. And then we get, the fucking Goldberg match,
Mm.
which nobody was surprised at all in terms of length and quality and results.
Well,
Like,
I don't know. I was partly surprised by the result, just because I figured they seemed so intent on Roman Reigns winning the title from Goldberg that I figured maybe there's like an outside chance that Goldberg would like retain the title here and then drop it to Roman down the line, especially since like it was like really lame how there was no attempt to explain why Braun got the title shot in the first place. Like there was just no explanation, just like, oh yeah, Braun's going for the title now. Okay, why? At least Roman Reigns, like, I mean, he didn't do anything. He just kind of came out and said, I'm next. But that was
right.
better build than what Braun Strowman had, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird situation all around.
Yeah, well, to me, I feel like you're gonna get a better story out of Braun Strowman versus Roman Reigns. Those two guys have history.
Mm,
You could easily have Braun Strowman, which this is something they should have done years ago, where
yeah.
you have Braun Strowman as a monster heel versus Roman Reigns, the good babyface. Like, that could work. That angle works better. And dare I say, they're gonna have a better match than Roman Reigns versus Goldberg.
Mm-hmm.
Goldberg.
God bless him.
Goldberg's never been well known for being a good worker, right? He can do his little squash matches, and he can do the stuff that hypes people up. right? I'm not knocking Goldberg. Well, I am knocking Goldberg, but like at a certain point in time, he was very good at what he did, and I don't think that can be disputed, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, this is 20 years after that time.
Yeah.
So, no more Goldberg. There's no point in him doing the same thing that he did back then because it doesn't work right, especially against a guy like Braun Strowman or even Roman Reigns.
Well,
Like,
it's funny because like I was talking to like a mutual friend of ours as we were watching the match, and
oh,
he
I
was
think I can
like,
guess which one.
and he was like, there is no way that he's going to pick up Braun Strowman for a jackhammer. Like, how are they going to finish this match? Because we both assumed Goldberg was going over, and yeah, it turns out they didn't even try because obviously it was not going to happen.
Right. So they're just like, whatever. Here you go. This is what you get for
Yeah.
being dedicated fans of the product. You know. I mean, that's what gets me about it. Like these are your World Heavyweight Championship matches at WrestleMania. Like that. Had it been one night and we stayed up all night to watch it, even if there was a crowd there, and that's what we got out of both of those Heavyweight Championship matches, I would have been livid. Livid. The fact that they split them up made it easier to swallow.
Yeah.
But still not amazing by any stretch of the imagination, shall we say. And yeah, I put that down on my not good list. I just wrote both Heavyweight Championship matches.
What else is on that list then?
Well, Orton Edge going too long. There was a weird vibe about the whole show. You didn't need a host.
Yeah, what the fuck was that about?
Didn't need that guy at all. For example, at the start of night one, you have fucking what's his name and Mojo Rawley, and they're the hosts, and they're cheering on the first match. And then 2 or 3 matches go by where there's just silence, and then at the start of the like 4 or 5 matches in, at the start of it, you see those 2 guys again, and they're whooping and cheering and stuff. I'm like, well, where were they a moment ago? Where were they for the other fucking matches? Why weren't they making noise? I mean, obviously it's because it was all pre-taped and cut together. But you're like, well, what was the point of having those guys as hosts? There was no point because later on in night 2, they disappeared, and then Titus O'Neil showed up for no reason.
Yeah.
And he was the host, and he wasn't advertised, and he wasn't fucking anything.
He didn't add anything to the show as well.
No, he didn't. Like, what was the point of him there? He didn't interview people. He didn't he didn't talk about the matches. He didn't host it. That was a waste of time. Some of the matches were of dubious quality, let's say. And my big criticism was it was a little cartoony.
Yeah.
In certain aspects. I feel like we should probably devote the rest of the podcast to this bit.
Okay.
Which is what I'm going to call the Matt Hardy effect. And I hate him. I hate him for this now. I hate him. Let me backtrack a little bit and say that a couple of weeks ago on All Elite Wrestling, whenever Matt Hardy was no longer employed by the WWE, he appeared in the arena in All Elite Wrestling. And then the week after that, him and Jericho had a little face-off thing, right? And honest to God, it was one of the worst things I'd ever seen. Bearing in mind, we both sat through Seth Rollins versus Bray Wyatt in the Hell in a Cell. And that was only like 6 months ago.
Yeesh.
And I watched this, and I haven't got your opinions on this. I don't know really what you think about it. But for me, I was just like, I hate every second of this.
Yeah.
Because Jericho is better than that. And at the time, I saw Matt Hardy teleporting, and in my head, I was like, I hope to God that they never do a teleporting angle in wrestling again. That would be terrible. Matt Hardy doing his stick, which was exactly the same as it was in TNA.
Yep.
Like, there was no, like, he was doing the same catchphrases. The one thing we say about Chris Jericho is that he's always smart enough to invent himself and reinvent himself and keep being different. And if that was Jericho in that role, he would have tried like something different and came up with something different. And Matt Hardy didn't. And so you're like, well, I can see why Vince McMahon let you go?
Well,
'Cause
Matt Hardy's idea of doing something different was he's now possessed by a spirit called Damascus. It's like, okay, but you're still doing the exact same shtick you were doing 3 years ago, whatever.
the same catchphrases and the same tone of voice and the same look. You know, it's the same. It's the same. And to see Jericho kind of getting dragged down because Jericho had been so good.
Mm-hmm.
Jericho had been so good. He'd been untouchable. And then suddenly he went from like the best thing on the show to like, you know, a finger snap away from just being dragged down with some of the worst stuff on the show. So after watching that a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I do not care for that. That's not the professional wrestling I want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Cut to WrestleMania this year. And I had to take it with a pinch of salt because I knew that they were going to do stuff like that. And I knew they were going to do stuff like that because of the pre-tape nature. And again, we've already said we had to give this, you know, we had to give them the benefit of the doubt sometimes. And they were in unfortunate circumstances. And so some of the matches that were pre-taped and pre-edited, you knew were going to be quite extravagant and a little bit showboaty and out there. Which brings us to the Boneyard match and the Firefly House of Fun match. What the fuck was that called?
Firefly Funhouse.
Firefly Funhouse match, right. So both of those matches have similarities between the Matt Hardy stuff in that A, there was teleporting for some reason, and B, you know, they were both like, you know, heavily edited and there was a lot of post-production shenanigans going on. Now, the thing I thought about the two of them was I enjoyed the Boneyard match the most out of those two matches because I thought that was the one that was kind of fixed with and messed around with the least, if that makes sense. That looked more like a straight-up wrestling match.
Yeah.
Because we've all seen silly shenanigans like a buried alive match or a fucking whatever match, right? And this Boneyard match had a theme of at least a theme of combat and fighting and the bare bones of what you want a wrestling match to look like. There's a heel and there's a face and there's odds stacked against somebody and there's stakes and things happen and you know it very loosely follows what a wrestling match is supposed to be. Whereas the Firefly whatever the fuck match was really like you had to pay attention to it and you had to get all the in jokes and the references and stuff like that. And if you did, it would be great. It would be like watching Avengers Endgame after having binge watched, you know, the last 5 years or 7 years or whatever of Marvel films. By the time you get to the end of it, you're going to be entertained because you understand it. But I don't know, man. That one was a little. Also, that one went way heavier on the teleporting than the Undertaker match.
Yeah.
I am already, you know, more in favor of Undertaker than the Bray Wyatt match. I mean, I understood what they were going for with the Bray Wyatt John Cena thing, and in a way, it was a good story that they were trying to tell, but it wasn't close to a wrestling match.
Yeah.
I mean, if they'd have presented it as something else, or like a little, you know, fun trip into, you know, John Cena's mind to show how Bray Wyatt's really got to him, whatever, that could work. But it just wasn't a wrestling match.
No, it's more like, you know, like avant-garde cinema or something. Like it was, like on the surface, it just looks so random, like so, you know, like all these different little skits and stuff, which, like you say, it not coming across like a typical wrestling match at all. I think it's only really afterwards where I've seen like people breaking it down a bit more that I've kind of come to appreciate it more than I did on the first watch. But then in a situation like that where you need someone to explain it to you,
Right.
it's not a good sign, is it? But yeah, like the whole sort of deconstruction of Cena's career was, I guess it was like an interesting idea, like taking him on this journey from like his ruthless aggression debut to, the Doctor of Thugonomics, and then like becoming this generation's Hulk Hogan. Like even like, sort of drawing comparisons to like the Hogan heel turn and him joining the NWO and stuff, and what could have been with Cena if he had, hit Bray Wyatt with that chair in their first WrestleMania match. Like there's elements there where, like, if you kind of know what's going on in there, it makes a certain sense,
Right.
and it kind of builds to this, like almost like a grand realization for the Cena character, where he kind of realizes that he's not really been the hero all along. So like in that regard, I can appreciate what they were going for, and I think it kind of sets up like a weird situation now for Cena. Like I don't think he can come back to WWE after this match, because it's basically broken him down and shown him for a fraud. So I don't know how he can come back and like act as if this match didn't happen, or somehow grow from it, or whatever. But yeah, it's just such a weird experiment. Whereas, like you say, at least the Boneyard match did sort of follow a more traditional story, even though I found the Boneyard match quite cheesy, and like a bit too overproduced as well. Like the amount of like just camera cuts was insane. Like it was just like constantly wham wham wham. Like do we really need to see this from like 15 different angles? I get to the effort to try and make it more cinematic or whatever, but I don't know. To me, it just came across as like more of a like directed DVD horror movie rather than like a big budget Hollywood movie. So it was a weird one. But I think after watching the Firefly Funhouse match, I ended up liking the Boneyard match more. After like not liking it at all when watching it, and kind of not getting it. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, right? Because after WrestleMania, after both nights were over, my brother asked me a very interesting question, which was, for wrestling to move forward now, like in the future, would you rather see more of Goldberg Lesnar stuff, aka part-timers doing short matches that are over, but they're always at the top of the card? Or would you rather see Boneyard Bray Wyatt stuff, aka more pre-taped and pre-produced things that aren't wrestling matches anymore? And I said, if those are my choices, which I would hate to see, but that's the problem, is that I feel like wrestling's going, it's already been one of those ways for a while. If I had to choose, I suppose I would have to choose the Lesnar Goldberg stuff, because that's more like wrestling. I don't want it to become pre-produced and pre-edited and stuff like this, because then it's not wrestling anymore. It's just a TV show, and that takes the fun away from it. That's, we all know it's gimmicked anyway. But if you really just like, if you just show people the compartment in your hat that shows you where the rabbit is, then nobody's gonna give a shit. You know what I mean? Everybody who watches a magic show knows the magic isn't real, but the fun of it is to see how you get fooled. But if somebody just goes, "Hey, I'm gonna show you a magic trick and this is how it's done," you're like, "Well, I don't care." There's no stakes, there's no interest in it. So I would reluctantly, if I had to choose between those two styles, I would have to say Goldberg and Lesnar, because at least one, it's short, and two, it's more like wrestling. Because I don't want things to go down that Matt Hardy route of just nonsensical bullshit. For a one-off appearance at a one WrestleMania this year under special circumstances, I will allow the Boneyard match or the Bray Wyatt thing to go through, right? Fair enough, we've already given them the benefit of the doubt. But if this turns up on WrestleMania next year, then they've gone too far. And if this turns up in AEW in 6 months, then I don't care. Like, then I'm out, you know? So my question to you is, what do you think? Would you rather have the Goldberg-Lesnar style of squash matches that are very short at the top of the card, or would you rather have the more theatrical, the more film-esque pre-production, cinematography kind of matches?
Well, I think I'm more like you, to be honest. I think I'm more of a traditionalist, like in terms of what I want from wrestling. I want good matches. I want stuff that will make me pop. Like the stuff that I grew up with almost. Whereas like these cinematic matches are just a bit like, with the right characters, I think they can work, but it has to be done like rarely. It can't become too commonplace. Otherwise, if we start seeing one of these type of matches every 2-3 months or whatever, or even like every 6 months, I think it's going to be too much and it's going to run its course pretty quickly. But at the same time, I think me and you are very much in the minority on that thinking, though. Like, looking at the reaction that, like, especially the Boneyard match got after WrestleMania, people love that. Like, the amount of praise it was getting on Twitter and social media and stuff, like, people absolutely loved the whole spectacle of it, and like the story they told and everything. Like, fair play to them. If you love that kind of thing, more power to you. But I don't know. It's just, to me, I feel like I'm stuck in my ways a bit, and like, I just want the wrestling I grew up with.
I don't necessarily want the wrestling I grew up with. I just want professional wrestling, because I don't want, if it just turns into a TV show, then I can just watch any fucking goddamn TV show. If it just turns into an Avengers film, there's already 30 Avengers films. Do you know what I mean? Like, the reason that people watch pro wrestling as opposed to other forms of sport or other forms of entertainment is because it's different and unique, and it doesn't fall into the same kind of traps that a lot of these other things do. Because it is what it is. You take it warts and all. If somebody fucks up a match, that's just the way it is, it is what it is. But once we start adding this kind of filmography to it, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, you were talking about how if they do this every 2 or 3 months, it's going to be bad. How many times did TNA do some kind of dumbass Matt Hardy thing? And the first time, everybody loved it. Everybody. I didn't. I'm like, this sucks. Like, it's not a match. It's not anything. It's Matt Hardy on a fucking lawnmower. It's, anybody could do this. That's the hook. I watch professional wrestling because I'm like, not everybody can do this. Anybody can make a film where they talk to a boat or whatever the fuck. A lot of it didn't make any sense. And that's, again, people know me and they know that that's my sense of humor. I have a very whimsical sense of humor, and I like strange, out there kind of gimmicks. But like, I like that in comedy. I don't like that in professional wrestling. Because number one, professional wrestling has been very traditionally been not very good at the comedy. And two, that's just not the place for it. And I don't want that style. And it depresses me even more to think that so many people were flipping out about how good these two matches were when they weren't matches. They're not professional wrestling matches.
Well, let me ask you a question then. Would you have preferred like a straight up match between Undertaker and AJ Styles at this point, where, Undertaker hasn't been having great matches for a long time? AJ, like, I hate to say it, but he's kind of not been hitting the heights that he was hitting like a couple of years ago. So do you reckon going the route that they went with this Boneyard match is better or worse than if they had like a straight up wrestling match at WrestleMania?
Well, I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I liked the Boneyard match as much as I did, is because before this whole quarantine happened, I knew the Undertaker versus AJ Styles God bless them both, was gonna suck ass because the Undertaker, like you can love the Undertaker all you want, and you can talk about how great he is, and he is great. He was great, but dude, he started in the WWE in 1990. Let's not kid ourselves here. By 2020, he shouldn't be wrestling. Let's not be fucking, let's be real about this. So I knew that before the quarantine, I knew that AJ Styles could be the best wrestler in the world, but he's not pulling the Undertaker to a good match. I was not at all interested in that match before this. Once I heard that they were doing a Boneyard match, whatever the fuck that was, and once I realized that they were going to be able to have more fun with it, I got more into it because I thought this will be more fun to watch. And I believe that it probably was. It was better than AJ Styles versus Undertaker could have been if it was just a straight one-on-one match. But then, you take into account a lot of gimmick matches. A lot of, for example, Edge versus Randy Orton. If that was 35 minutes of like pure chain wrestling, would that have been as interesting as 35 minutes of hardcore rules? They're two different matches. Undertaker versus AJ Styles at WrestleMania as a straight up wrestling match would have sucked 100%. In 2020, 100% it would have sucked.
Yeah.
But even if they had done that in the arena and given it a different, if they made it a buried alive match, for example, it would have been more interesting. So yes, I would rather have seen them in this Boneyard match than in a straight one-on-one match. But that doesn't really excuse the fact that you can get away with it, because I wouldn't have wanted to see that match to begin with anyway. Like I said, it's 2020. I don't want to see the Undertaker in a match. He has been in some great matches at WrestleMania already. There's no need to keep trying to go down that route because it's not going to work. That's probably why this match was so good, in that it wasn't a match. Undertaker was able to stop and take his breath in between takes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally different ballgame.
It kind of makes me think as well, like it opens the door, like because everyone wanted to see Undertaker versus Sting back in the day, like Sting especially, but obviously, by the time the stars aligned and they were both in the same company, it never happened. So I think this opens the door for extending Undertaker's career, allowing him to kind of keep not being relevant, but keep having a presence on WrestleMania, where he's been like the sort of the main WrestleMania performer pretty much for the entire run of the event. So he's kind of the face that you think of when you think of WrestleMania, given the streak and everything and all that. But I think it allows him, if it does continue into next year or however many years afterwards, it allows him to keep kind of having matches at WrestleMania, but not going out there and embarrassing himself, which can be a bad thing.
So would you rather see that then? Would you rather see Sting versus Undertaker in a pre-edited, pre-taped kind of shenanigans thing in 2021, or would you rather not see that at all?
I mean, I would probably, I'm at that point where I probably wouldn't want to see it at all.
Right.
But if it was a choice between one of these kind of Boneyard style matches and a regular match, I'd go for the Boneyard match for the exact same reason you were talking about, with the choice of Undertaker and AJ. But again, though, it's going to be a case of you can only do a Boneyard match so often. It would have to be, they'd have to find new scenarios or gimmicks or whatever to kind of present it as, because if they go back to that too often, then it's just gonna it's like anything, it'll have diminishing returns. So if they can keep it fresh and find new ways of doing it, hell yeah, why not? I mean, it won't ever be my cup of tea, but I can, if it's like other people love it, then, well,
Well,
let
other
them
people
have
are
it.
wrong. I'm gonna say this because other people have proved the wrongness by liking the Miz. They've already proved that they can't be trusted. The why not is because if it happens again at WrestleMania next year, then that means very soon it's gonna become a WrestleMania tradition.
Mm-hmm.
It's just gonna be a thing that we all have to accept and deal with. It's gonna be a Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. You know, it's gonna be a thing that we just have to accept, even though there's no logical reason for it. It's the same with the Undertaker match at WrestleMania. Undertaker had a great career, especially in WrestleMania matches, right? He
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to come back for the last 5 WrestleManias. If he hadn't have been there, his even up to the Brock Lesnar one, if they just stopped it before he lost the streak, nobody's gonna say, the Undertaker sucks at WrestleMania.
Mm.
His streak was already great. He had a great, incredible record, right? You could have stopped this. You didn't, but it became a tradition, and therefore, the older Undertaker gets, and the harder it is for him to work a good match, doesn't matter because we have to trot him out every year and make him do this, not because he wants to, but because he has to. And I don't want to see that because then you're gonna get a guy who just, just can't do the shit that he used to be able to do.
Mm.
And so there's no point in doing something solely for the sake of tradition if it's going to equal something that's detrimental to the business, if you know what I mean. And I feel like Undertaker being around the last couple of years has been detrimental to his business because it hasn't made Undertaker. This is the best Undertaker has looked in years.
Yeah.
And that's a fact, and that doesn't make him look good at all. And if this kind of stupid thing happens again at next WrestleMania, then that means that it's soon going to become a thing that always happens. And I didn't want that because that's pretty much why not pretty much why I stopped watching TNA, but like that put the exclamation point at the end of it. I'm like, I don't care about that. I don't want to watch that. And it's putting me off AEW. It's like, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch Matt Hardy being a clown. I don't. And I don't want to see that happen in WWE. They have enough shitty things in it as it is. I don't want to see them add more shitty things. Please, please, for the love of God. I like as a one-off thing, it's fine. But dude, if this happens more, you may have to find a new podcast host or co-host because just like I'm dangerously close to not giving a shit anymore. I thought WrestleMania as it was okay. It was fine. It wasn't the worst WrestleMania I've seen. I'm sure we've seen worse WrestleManias with worse matches and,
Yeah.
stuff like this. And again, benefit of the doubt, for the circumstances they were under, they did a good job with what they had. But if this is a template for how other WrestleManias are going to be, the only thing they should keep is the 2-day thing.
Yeah.
And even then, the fact that they have enough matches for 2 days is a bad thing.
Well, yeah, especially since there was a fair few matches which, under normal circumstances had no business whatsoever being on a WrestleMania card. So, I think that kind of diluted the specialness of the show a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck wants to watch Elias versus Baron Corbin? I mean,
especially after Baron Corbin already killed Elias.
Yeah.
We were watching that show and Elias comes out, like Baron Corbin threw him off a thing like 15 feet and he landed like a flat bump square on his back, right? Fucking Elias comes in with that tape on his shoulder and a bandage around his head. I'm like, do you guys know where somebody's spine is? You've missed the mark twice. And also, I think it's going to take a little bit more than that to shine that injury up. You know what I mean? You're not going to fix it with some of that flexo tape on your shoulder. Like, what the fuck, man? Yeah, definitely there was stuff on there that you're like, I don't care about this. This could have been changed or edited or not been put on the show. So I don't know I'm trepidatious to say that we will have to wait and see what happens with the future of wrestling, because in the next month, next episode, I'd love to talk about that Dark Side of the Ring stuff. That would be
Yeah.
really cool. However, I would really not be happy if that gets derailed by us talking about more Matt Hardy bullshit.
Yeah.
I am saying it now, because at some point all we can say is that it's bullshit, and I just don't want wrestling to go down that road, because at the end of the day, that's just not wrestling.
Yeah, it's just moving it further and further away from what it should be.
Right, exactly. And that's not gonna. I mean, if it does get new fans in, it's just because you've just changed the product completely to something else, and that's there's no point. What's the point of calling it wrestling anyway? It defeats the purpose of the whole game.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I feel like both of us have mixed opinions on WrestleMania.
Yes, that's fair to say.
I think that's the best way to say it. So, we'd love to hear what everybody else said about WrestleMania. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, what parts you did like and what parts you didn't like. If you all loved the Boneyard match and the John Cena match, maybe keep it to yourselves. I mean, if you liked it, that's fine. But if you think that that's the future of wrestling, then I don't know what to say.
No, we can't be friends anymore.
You can't listen to the podcast anymore. Only joking. We need as many people to listen as possible. But yeah, we'd love to hear what people think about WrestleMania. This is what we thought, and yeah. So I think that's pretty much that one. Is there anything else you want to say about WrestleMania before you wrap things up?
No, I think we've hit all the major points.
We covered it pretty well, didn't we?
Yeah.
Fucking nailed it. It wasn't terrible, but it also was not an A+.
No.
No.
I think night one was a lot better than night two as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Night one flowed better. It had more interesting matches. And again, night one wasn't perfect by any means. But if that was just a one-off pay-per-view, you'd be like, oh, that was all right.
Yeah.
Night two is a bit more nitpicky, I think. But there you go. 6.5 hours of WrestleMania. Eesh, what did we do to deserve this?
Yeah.
But anyway, that was our WrestleMania rundown. We will be back in the next episode, whenever that'll be, for some more good wrestling shenanigans. But thank you very much for listening, guys. And we'll see you in the next one.